afternoon and welcome if you're just joining us now at POLITICO's AI and Tech Summit. My name is Mathieu Pollet. I am a technology reporter at POLITICO. We're now going to dig a little bit deeper into the collision course that some see emerging between Europe's digital and green transitions. The European Commission wants to triple the number of data centers by 2030 to fuel the AI boom and turn Europe into the AI continent. But demands for power, water and land are surging and raising red flags already across the bloc. So we'll unpack some of these tensions and challenges in a minute, but I invite you already to join the conversation via Slido with questions and by sharing on social media. But let's get right into it with our great lineup of panelists. So I have with me today Andrea Halmos, the Deputy Head of Unit for Strategy, Digitalization, Better Regulation and Economic Analysis at DG Environment. That's a mouthful, so that's within the European Commission. I've got Lex Coors, the President of the European Data Center Association. To your right, we've got Kim van Sparrentak, a Green member of the European Parliament and a former shadow rapporteur for the AI Act. And on the very end, we have Jakob Mökander, the Director for Science and Technology Policy at the nonprofit Blair Institute for Global Change. Thank you so much for being here. Andrea, I'd like to turn to you immediately. I think I realized preparing this panel that as a tech reporter, I didn't get to speak that often with actually sustainability expert, but I think our paths are going to increasingly cross in the future years. So I'm just curious, so from where you're sitting at DG Environment, how do you see AI? Is it like a friend, a foe, both?
Thank you for the question. I think over the last commission, we've heard a lot about this twin digital and green transition. And while the ambitions of the Green Deal remain obviously very, very important, obviously the current Commission has a lot of focus on competitiveness, and we cannot ignore the possibilities that AI can create for our economy, for our competitiveness. And if you think about the fact that the environmental impact of digital technologies is about 4 to 5%, could be possibly higher if we need a lot more data centers, but the potential AI can do for actually improving environmental conditions is about 15%. So our ambition is really, when we think about green and digital transition, is that every euro spent on digital technologies should actually somehow contribute to better sustainability ambitions, but also really explore how we can take that 15% of potential really to the forefront, what we can do with it, not just monitoring and forecasting what AI can do, obviously, and foreseeing horrible floods or droughts, but what we can also do with AI is really optimizing resources, looking at the circular economy where we can actually create completely new business models, traceability of products, but also, for example, helping to facilitate the work of some of the professionals who help in reporting and environmental impact assessments and so on. So the next phase of the Commission should really be at looking at this coming even closer, this digital and the green transition for the purpose of European competitiveness.
Yes, indeed, AI is not all bad, right? And we'll explore some of that in a minute. But before, I'd like to turn to Lex, actually representing the industry. The AI boom is obviously supercharging computing demand right now. And I'm just wondering whether you can give us a little sense of what's the pressure like on your industry, on data centers right now? How does it translate into?
Yeah, I think we first need to step back where this started. If you look at the old days steam age, something that happened many hundreds of years ago, there was no way back. We're now building the digital economy and society. That's something new. So when we started this, we were actually supporting the old economies with our digital infrastructure. But that has all changed. Nearly everything around us is connected. And more will be connected. And AI, especially where we are now in the fourth wave, which is Gen AI, is asking for a lot of additional capacity. If you look at the announcements of the US, they say $1 trillion plus. Europe will stay behind with hundreds of billions for 2025. And that's already, let's say, something that is, I believe, not really good. So I believe that if you look at also the hurdles that are put in front of us now, some countries are saying, we don't want you to build data centers. We're not building data centers, we're building a digital infrastructure to support the digital economy. It's not just a data center. If no one would use an app, there would be no data center because there would be no traffic. So that's something that we need to realize as well. And so we're speeding up. We're doing everything we can to support Europe, because this is not a linear delay on AI. This is an exponential delay. It's a race of 4 years. If we lose the race in 4 years, we lose AI sovereignty. We may lose further sovereignty because in 4 years, let's say, the cognitive capabilities of AI will surpass human brain, and then we don't know what will happen there. So that's why we're so serious on this. This is why we do everything to build the digital infrastructure to support everyone.
Kim, I wanted to ask you, because as you've just highlighted, data centers have a key role to play in competitiveness and sovereignty, and those are there's a big momentum around in Europe, as you're fully aware. Everything these days about competitiveness, sovereignty. Europe is in a race with the US and China on pretty much everything. Tech is one of these things. Are you concerned that this race and this whatever it takes moment may put also like the green transition, the green targets in the back burner?
Well, I think I've been worried for a long time, not only about AI, but in general. I think in the last mandate we had the European Green Deal. We had a Europe fit for the digital age. The second part was a lot about investment in infrastructure, in digitization. The other one was in making sure we reduced the amount of energy used, the amount of CO2 produced in Europe, and they were going in opposite directions. And I think we've made a big mistake there by not immediately trying to do it as good as possible, because that's the big difference, of course, with the time when the steam engine came. We now know how to do things more sustainable, but we chose to not set standards in that direction, and I think that's really a pity. So I really hope that we can learn from that mistake, and I'm very happy also that also the commissioner, when I recently asked written questions about this, especially in this race around building enough data centers, said that with the new European Cloud and AI Development Act, environmental conditionalities will be part of getting funding. And also what we're seeing, of course, the US is really pushing this narrative that the way they do AI should be the golden standard. But I think also seeing that there's also a race with China and the things they did in terms of the amount of energy that they have to use to create similar systems as the US, I think we can also learn from them. I don't think that there should be a taboo on that, and that we should really try to make sure that we develop in the most sustainable way. Because also that's the only way I think we can be competitive, because the energy prices are very complicated. You know, they're going very much up and then they're going very much down. So the more sustainable we are and the least energy we use, also the more competitive our data centers will be to actually develop on, rather than systems that are built in a very unsustainable way for which you need way more energy.
I want to follow up on your metaphor on the twin transition going in different directions. Are they at risk at colliding now? Is one outpacing the other now?
Well, I think when there's announcement of huge investments without even mentioning the sustainability part, I think we are losing track a bit of where we're going. So I really hope that the Commission will step up their game soon.
Jakob, so AI is not just chatbots, right? You know that, we know that, but it's not just chatbots, it's energy-intensive, energy-hungry infrastructure. Is that reality also like sinking too late in policy-making circles? Are we just waking up to that reality?
So I think it's true that there are a lot of dependencies between these two transitions that you have been outlining, and we can rightly call them a twin transition, both the green transition and the AI revolution. But the direction is bidirectional. Right? So yes, technology do consume energy, and 1 to 2% of the world's energy demand go to data centers. But at the same time, we're also using AI and other machine learning techniques to optimize our grid systems to be more efficient in model training. And this is not limited to AI. That means other processes. Think about transportation, which is a way bigger post of the energy budget than air training. There's a lot of inefficiencies there, and if everything we can do to make everything from traffic flows to train, right? That is really important. But for us at the Tony Blair Institute, and for me also personally, I think the bigger question is, we are right now not on track to meet even the climate target we have. And this is a serious problem. And we should also not pretend that sticking to them in language will actually help address the real problems that we're facing. So just very briefly, how we view the sort of political reality was that there was a phase of activism around climate change, maybe from, let's say, in the 1980s up to Al Gore's and Inconvenient Truth, where it was more about awareness raising. And then we entered the second era of optimism, where we said we can actually do this with renewable energy, with green parties, green movements in Europe. And of course, the Paris then declaration was almost the pinnacle of that. But in the last 5-6 years, we have seen an era of apathy, where fewer and fewer world leaders are even bothering to show up on COP, where it's less and less support for green parties in Europe. And we believe that the right approach here is not to passively defend the status quo, but to see what are all the full toolbox of levers that we can address to address the climate change. And that includes technology. So we absolutely will have to view this as a twin transition and include things like carbon capture as adaptation alongside a big investment into renewable energy and sustainability to even stand a chance to do this. And the final point on that is international collaboration, but that we can come back to.
And we certainly will. Kim, I wanted also like to follow up on what you said about the US having their way, the Chinese having their way. In Brussels, we often talk about the third way, right, for a lot of the topics we discuss here and others. So what's our third way here? What does it look like to make sure our green, or AI transition even, is green?
Yeah. So, well, the first step I think we took when we were negotiating the Artificial Intelligence Act. I actually wanted environmental standards already there. I didn't win that battle. Sometimes politicians also lose battles, and they're honest about it. But I did win that we will have environmental transparency. At least to know how much energy is actually being used by AI systems. And that's already a gold mine of information in order to really anticipate, how we can further set environmental standards. So that is one of the things that we are now working on, and I really hope the Commission is also speeding up that process, making sure that soon we will have the standards to which AI systems have to report on the amount of energy they use. So that's at least the first step, because right now there's a lot of black box situations where we actually don't even know how much energy is being used. And then, of course, making sure that, when we do investments, we do them in a smart way. We're now also discussing the Public Procurement Directive, where we're also seeing more and more discussions like, okay, let's try to make sure that we prefer European companies, making sure that, for example, when we store the data of our citizens, we do that on European cloud to make sure that it's actually in our hands and no foreign entities can actually access the data of our citizens. But also making sure that we do it indeed in line with the Green Deal, making sure that there are environmental standards, and making sure that when you do actually put a lot of money, because that's what we're talking about. We're putting indeed billions into this. Make sure that that doesn't just make a few shareholders somewhere else very happy, but that we're actually doing something that's good for Europe, not too bad for the environment, and also something that is good for our citizens.
Mm-hmm. Andrea, I saw you nodding to some of the points that Kim raised. So what do you think is our third way as a European to have sustainable AI?
I was just thinking, we had the Europe Day not long ago, no? And when you look at the Schuman Declaration, how Europe started, there's a certain set of values that we all kind of come together on, and one of them is respect for environment and nature, and I think that's kind of inherently part of our DNA on how we look at our greater environment. But I think with what we are seeing now is that with the possibilities of AI, we are trying to also identify potential ways to see even economic benefits of creating new solutions, creating new services, using all kinds of applications and so on that can make it even an economically interesting area to invest in. So I think that's what you're also saying about. We are now in this new digital economy. We need to accept it. It's going much, much faster. We know that although it's a twin transition, one is going much faster than the other. But we need to kind of bring these closer together, find also ways how the industry, European companies see a benefit in it. And in the Commission, as you said, in the AI Continent Action Plan, we saw that the Commission is aiming to kind of invest in European cloud providers that will have environmental consciousness and will be able, and we had the energy efficiency directive, you have to report on how your data centers are, so there's data on that, you're creating some kind of a sensitivity that this matters for us. So I think for us it's like European, certain value-based going forwards, trying to identify potential for actually profit-making possibilities for companies to see the benefit in, you know, what business models work in circular economy and so on. So I think it's a right momentum to dig deeper into this.
Lex, actually, I wanted to hear you on this because indeed, so with data centers, you're powering AI, but I would assume you're also already using AI to optimize, or you will, because as Kim said earlier, and I'm sure you totally sign up to that, is that being sustainable is also a big competitive asset. And I would assume that data centers are trying to be, by design, as sustainable as possible because power comes at a price, right?
Yeah, and interesting enough, we are a young industry, and I think that the majority of the members are already operating at 100% of clean energy already. We are operating, for instance, my company, since 2014 already, 100% clean energy. Most of the competition is doing that. And then obviously we leave out a big bunch of small data centers, 500 kilowatt and below. We don't look at them. And they are the worst in the energy efficiency, and they're the worst in the energy usage because they use whatever is cheap. And so I think that's something that we still need to look at the European Commission, where we say, hey, let's include all the data centers. The majority of us are also reporting already for many years to the European Code of Conduct for Energy Efficiency. So Europe is pretty much aware of all the energy that we're using. That is aggregated and anonymous, and then it's used as trending, which is really useful. So we're happy with these things. You know, for instance, the EED as such, the EUDCA, we are co-founders of the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact. We did self-regulate ourselves before the EED was actually finished. So we're pretty much okay with all of these things. But the thing we're now looking at is that there is an old plan for 54 gigawatts of grid upgrade for Europe. That was from before Gen AI. I don't think that's enough. So I think that people need to realize what are we trying to solve here. What we're trying to solve at this moment is that we maintain our sovereignty. And that's not only AI sovereignty, because once this is in place, if there is a winner, we're in trouble. And secondly, it will then impact everything around us as well. So I think that we need to think about how can we remove hurdles for investment. There is enough money in the world. There is enough available also to invest in Europe. But there are so many, let's say, uncertainties. We're happy, as I said, with what is now in the EED. We're happy in some countries.
The Energy Efficiency Directive.
Yeah, we're happy in some cases. In some countries, they put PUE targets. You know, are we?
That's a lot of acronyms. I need to
tell you. Sorry,
there are
yes.
a lot of
You go ahead.
mortals like me. I know that, but maybe can you,
Yeah, so there is an energy efficiency target. It's called power usage effectiveness. And it basically means how much power do you need on top of your AI system or IT system to actually generate the whole data center, to operate it, to do the cooling, everything on top of that. So even though some of these numbers we believe, are they still realistic, they create level playing field. So same investment. You hear no one complaining about this. Are we trying to negotiate? Are we trying to explain things? Yes, sure we are. But we're not against these things. Water is another one. We're very serious on water. If you look at the systems that we're using, typically closed loop. So we realize that it's not only potable water that's important, but we also realize that water for flora and fauna is also something, you know. Some people only talk about potable water. Oh, we only use 30% potable water. Yes, but it use 70 for flora and fauna. No, 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 no. Everything that's indicated as fresh water, sweet water, is important for us.
I want to move on actually on those very practical topics, but before we do that, I would like to turn to Jakob. I think something I find like very fascinating about this discussion is that not every country actually within the EU start on equal footing, right? Some are power stressed, some others are water stressed, some like the Nordics have this like natural edge, some others, I'm thinking France here, like pitch themselves as the place to be because of nuclear in their energy mix. So how do we balance all of this? How do we take that into consideration when designing, when thinking about the best approach from Brussels?
So let me take that question about international collaboration both as a European question but also as a global question. So you're starting with a global lens that even if we now talk about this from a European perspective, the climate crisis will not be solved by any single geopolitical bloc. Even with the best of goodwill within Europe and perfect collaboration, ultimately, those investments and those intent will be futile unless we can build broader networks and coalitions for change, and that includes with the Americans and the Chinese. But if we now look inwards in Europe, the best thing to do is to look at the whole energy ecosystem from a production, use, and resilience perspective as Europe written large, so bigger than the EU. And that means from Ireland and the UK, with Europe, including Switzerland, including Norway, and all the way to also our eastern and southeastern neighbors. And this is because different geographies have different affordances. So there will be production at one point when there's not another. There can be resilience in the system. We can allow the surplus of renewable energy to flow across borders. Today, we don't have enough of that infrastructure, so investment into physical infrastructure, both production but also grid, will be hugely important. Not everything will be met by excess production. We also have to work with other tools like demand response, for example, in energy-intensive industries. While at the same time, and this is the most important point, we also need to be radically pragmatic. For example, some industries actually have a very high operational cost in ramping up and down production, and that can even harm certain very high precision equipment, both in data centers but also in precision manufacturing. So there needs always to be the backup generation, but that has to be thought about in this sort of broader system lens. So we actually want to see a more bold Europe, a more muscular Europe that invests in not just digital infrastructure, but also physical infrastructure to enable this climate transition to happen in Europe, but also internationally.
Please, yeah. To support that, because we have the capital to build, let's say, power plants as well. So it's not just because we like the supergrid model from that perspective. It's only that the transmission contracts between the countries are typically for a year. That's a big hurdle. Remove it. You know, let the energy flow through countries. Let's not suddenly be France or Germany or the Netherlands. Let's be Europe. Transmit the energy. Let's deal with it all together. And let's do something beautiful.
Certain cities, I'm thinking Amsterdam actually, in Dublin region, I think some cities also in Spain have already like imposed in the past at least some moratoriums. It's not the best way forward, is it, Kim?
Well, it depends. If you look at Amsterdam, I mean, and the Netherlands, it's quite a full country, and also we have a huge problem with our energy grid. So not building a new data center, I'm not surprised that Amsterdam would put a moratorium there. It also didn't help that, one of the things that happened in the Netherlands is that we built our biggest on-land wind farm, and all that energy, rather than actually going to the households of the people that had to look at it, went all to the data centers of Microsoft. I mean, that caused a lot of fury, and I understand why, because actually, it is something that the neighborhood was thinking that actually they would become sustainable by accepting this wind farm next to them. So I think it is a bit of both. I think in the end, we have to address this as a European problem. And in some places, there's just not that much space, like literally not that much space. In some places, there's not enough water. And indeed, that's why we should have, the European action plan. And I think in general, Especially when we're talking about having, these really big factories like gigafactories. You want to create an ecosystem where people get together. It's not only about the infrastructure which we're talking about, but that also means that you have more startups, that you have more companies that actually use those data centers. If that's all centered together, you actually create an ecosystem that's way more vibrant. So it's also way smarter to choose, and I know this is very difficult always, because as soon as the council's involved, it's like, but I want my country to do this. Yeah. But in the end, it is way more efficient if we all put it more closely together in the places that are the most efficient, and also where it's the most logical, and in the middle of a neighborhood somewhere in the Netherlands, which is quite a cramped country, is not always the smartest.
Please, Lex.
Yeah, I'd like to answer that, because many years ago there was a decision made in the Netherlands. Rotterdam will be the port, Amsterdam will be the digital hub. So all the main fiber lines are crossing Amsterdam. They're not crossing, let's say, Limburg. They're not crossing other regions. So if we want to remove that hurdle, if we want to now, let's say, create a huge pipeline across the whole of the Netherlands and across all of the cities to actually do something with it, that will take 8 years, 9 years, not to think about the permits underneath railroads, across bridges, all of these kind of things. So I think that station has passed. But what the Netherlands need to realize is that we're working on light speed. So if the Netherlands say, stop it building, we just go a border further, we do the same, and the Netherlands go back into Stone Age.
But what's the solution, like short term, if we reach maximum capacity on the power grid?
There is no short-term solution. There is a solution of discussing what are the opportunities. And that's something where we as the digital infrastructure, we do have capital. We do want to participate in these conversations. We do want to talk about what is there as a next solution. Is it hydrogen? Is it, as a moment, a lower carbon fuel, gas, in the transition to hydrogen, clean hydrogen? Are these SMRs? We don't know. We are at the EUDCA, we are a member of the work group to start to understand what does it mean. You cannot simply say, oh, SMR, let's do something. No, you need to understand. So as the industry, we're trying to understand what does it mean, what are the type of fuels, how dangerous is one over another, what's the feasibility, what's the permittability, all of these things.
Yeah. Jakob, you want to also like to jump in on this?
Yes, maybe trying to tie together a few different strands here that are happening. Just first on the co-location, I think that's a very good idea. In the UK, we're currently right now considering AI growth zones that came out of this AI Opportunities Action Plan that the government and Keir Starmer announced earlier this year. And that is built around this very idea of co-location. And it's also strategic places where maybe energy is cheaper and it's outside of people's sight of mind. But at the same time, I also think that this reaction that came against the wind farm and the data center is part of the attitude problem that we have to work with, and also as leaders, whether technology leaders and political leaders, try to help and educate, because in the end, an energy system, it's a system, and any input and any output are equivalent. So this idea that this is my wind farm and my house and my consumption, it's actually a false mental model. And as long as we're stuck into such model, we will not be able to optimize at a systems level, right? So it's a bit like, when you win on a lottery ticket and you think, now I can award myself this fancy meal or this nice zero. In the end, it comes from your saving account, same as, and that's also how we have to approach this energy. Final point on the generation technology. I think in Europe, it's true that technology might still be a blocker in some cases. As you say, there's still research to do on small modular reactors in nuclear and hydrogen. But in most of the world, technology is not the limiting factor for climate transition. It's political will and state capacity. And in most countries, we don't have stable enough environment to even do planned transition that lasts 5 or 10 years needed to do that. So a super important thing that Europe writ large, again, both EU and UK can do, is to help countries that are high emission but lack the state capacity to get the stability and the technology they need to reduce emission. And that will be way more impactful than also some of the intervention we're discussing here.
Andrea, you've got a lot of input already as you start drafting future proposal. What do you take away? Anything you want to jump in particular?
I was thinking, well, Just a small note that, of course, Rotterdam, we shouldn't completely ignore the fact that there are some amazing, also all over Europe, so-called local digital twins that use AI to actually look at current state of the city or the environment and its impact on the environment, and then also predict things and maybe even help make strategic decisions about the environment. So that's a very interesting use case. But when you were talking about, what do we need to do together in Europe, and as you rightly said, any of the environmental impact is not constrained to a physical border. So we need to think, way beyond our borders. What is, I think we haven't mentioned yet, and I wanted to bring in as part of maybe the infrastructure, is the data. And I'm really pleased to see that, with all the new data-related regulations and all the ambition to make it, bring it further to actually have sufficient data for AI, I'm really pleased to see that there's a huge potential in the area of environment. There's a lot of data collected for, be it reporting purposes, be it monitoring purposes, and we need to see how we best share that data. The concept we use is the data spaces, and we would really like to create this, for example, Green Deal data space where that data sharing in a secure environment between any player that plays by the rules of the game can actually do that for creating public value or creating private value for companies for greater competitiveness.
The European Commission next year will propose the AI cloud, the AI and development, Cloud and AI Development Act. We need to come up with an acronym for this one, actually. We'll allow it. It will aim to boost the numbers of the number of data centers across Europe. But then also, my understanding is to really keep sustainability front and center. You hinted to that earlier about this conditionality. I'm just wondering how those two objectives will practically translate into.
Indeed. So of course it's still to come, but the ambition is, as you will have seen it in the AI Continent Action Plan, is that indeed we will try to create the potential for European cloud suppliers and all over, especially for edge computing all over Europe, but with the aim to actually create sustainable data centers, meaning as for now, I understand permitting takes extremely long, but for those, for example, data centers that will comply with, some of the energy efficiency or water efficiency indications will have, for example, quicker permitting access and so on. And so there will be an incentive to go beyond that. And then, of course, together with the Energy Efficiency Directive, the larger data centers are already under obligation to show what they do for the environment.
I want to ask you about this, but I also want to pick up this question on Slido from Leonardo on CCIA Europe, who is basically asking also how this, the Future Act will align also with the broader simplification efforts. Right now we're seeing, considering that there is already like the Energy Efficiency Directive, the Eco-Design Directive, how does this new piece of legislation will fit also in this simplification push?
We need to, overall the idea is, as you will have seen in the Commission's Competitiveness Compass, that there is an ambition to help spur greater competitiveness by lowering burden on especially SMEs. But we also need to make sure that with that, we will not reduce the ambition that we had for environment and for other aspects. So here again, I think technology can greatly help. Simplify by creating, more efficient ways of reporting or reusing the data that's already been reported elsewhere. So here again, there's a huge potential, and we'll be looking at that as well.
You also just talked about collecting data. Yourself at the Commission, you've been collecting data about the electricity usage, the energy efficiency from data centers, and you're actually facing a deadline this week. I'm not. This is not homework time. I'm not going to ask you about it. But so you're supposed to present the result of this evaluation and also potentially come up with proposal to fix things. We're talking about maybe minimum standards. I guess my question is also like, where do we draw the line? You just said that maybe for the Future Cloud and AI Development Act, there will be faster permits for sustainable data centers, but where do we draw the lines?
I would really not like to preempt the conclusions of the stakeholder consultation. There's been a very extensive consultation, and rest assured that in about a few months' time, there will be a a conclusion on that and looking at the various options. This will be my colleagues in DG Energy who will then come forward and...
Well, interesting enough, so Ernst Young, who is advising the European Commission, we have been talking to them and we actually advise them, do it per age of data center. So now you also have, let's say, the trend of the efficiency of the data centers, the more modern data centers, the older data centers, per capacity. Because then you will see that if you do it on a weighted average, you can see these old ones, the small ones, they're very inefficient still, and then you get the bigger ones, and from 2012, 2013 onwards, they get to 10, 20 megawatt, 100 megawatt, 200 megawatt. You see also the efficiency curve going through up, and so we really advise that, because then you would have a good, because now they say we do a median PUE. I said that's a bad thing, because now you have a very funny number, because it will have the same impact of a 500 kilowatt over a 200 megawatt.
But would you welcome any sort of, I don't know the shape yet, of course, but would you welcome any binding minimum standards?
Yeah.
Or would you rather also like keep to self-regulation, which is something also like you spoke
Well, you know,
to
I
earlier?
think self-regulation has passed. You know, we gave it a good effort. We put some good standards. We actually are sometimes referred to as the Climate Neutral Data Center Pact. So, but now it's regulated.
It's not often that we hear the industry
Well, you know,
say that.
well, you know, you want, if preferable, no regulation, but you saw what we did. So we're also not that afraid of regulation. We are afraid of mistakes sometimes that are made. And we know that the EED was written in a very fast pace. You know, it had to be done. And they also said it will not be completely perfect. Now, that's what we saw, for instance, with the data collection for the ICT data. We said make it anonymous and aggregated. And they said the minimum requirement in the EED is publicly available per data center. So, you know, that creates a big issue, because many people see data as confidential. So that's one of the things I believe we should fix.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jakob?
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on that point on also regulation and technology, because I think this is a moment in time for Europe to also stand a bit tall and be the force in the world that shows that in both technology and regulation, it's a question of design. To be anti either technology or regulation in principle is completely intellectually dishonest. It's always a question about how is this particular technology design or how is this particular regulation constituted. And just as also was saying, is that well-crafted regulations are actually the most important thing for businesses. To have a level playing field, to have international standards and interoperability, and only so can Europe get both growth and reach ambitious climate target. And I hope that everyone in this room and also online, that we can move beyond that point of a more reductive discussion on that topic.
Mm-hmm. Kim, is that the right way forward?
I mean, you know, I would also like us to stand tall, you know, stop having a bit of this Calimero effect of like, oh my goodness, they are so big, we can't do anything. You know, we can be quite proud of what we are doing in Europe. We can be proud of the regulations we have. But unfortunately, for some reason, we've lost confidence, and we're now, without even looking at the impact, without any proper impact assessment, slashing legislation out of some sort of fear. I don't think that's the way forward, that's for sure. And also, you know, like creating instability constantly for all different sectors. That's not the way forward. So I really hope that, you know, as Europe, we can really be a bit more proud of the organizations and the businesses we have. I mean, and that's the interesting thing, because meanwhile we are now working on this public procurement revision, and there we are actually realizing, well, we have a lot of very good European companies. We can actually go for a European preference in public procurement. Maybe that's actually the way forward, because we have a lot of great, also on the technology side, companies and organizations who are doing great work. So I really hope that our way forward is be proud, stand tall, and know what we stand for. And we stand for, you know, going towards a world that is still livable in a few years, and also making sure we keep up with the tech race and see how we can make sure we combine those. But no, don't neglect either of them.
Okay, thank you so much on that hopeful somewhat hopeful note. I'm going to wrap up this conversation. Thank you so much for the fascinating input. I think that conversation is not going anywhere anytime soon, so we'll probably have plenty of other opportunities to talk about this. So thank you so much for your time. We're heading into a well-deserved, elated lunch break shortly to digest not just the food, but everything we've discussed so far. Don't rush off just yet. Laura and Cyrillus, my editor, will be up in a moment to share some of key takeaways from this morning's session. Think of it as your appetizer. Thank you very much.
I don't think so. Oh, there we go. Hi, everyone in the room. Thank you to Mathieu. Thank you to the panel for closing this morning of Politico's AI and Tech Summit. I'll keep it short because everyone's hungry. I understand that. I have the pleasure to close the first half day of the Politico's AI and Tech Summit. And this first half day, we've worked through a couple of themes and topics. We've worked through innovation and regulation. We've worked through what the infrastructure of AI means and how we will adapt to that. Allow me to highlight just 3 things from this morning. First of all, we've heard from the European Commission that it is open to targeted tweaks of its AI Act, if it turns out that that is what the industry and others want, and if they indicate so in their consultation. That is a clear opening to review rules that were finalized just 1 year ago in a record trilogue meeting that lasted over a day. I think it's something like 36 hours that final negotiation lasted. So when we get to reopening, who knows how long those negotiations might last. On investment, we've heard good news on investment coming into Europe to support its ambitions on AI, but we've also heard critical comments on whether the EU's own efforts in public funding and in public schemes to support that industry, in effectively spending taxpayers' money, if those efforts are actually moving the needle in the industry. And lastly, our last panel talked about the impacts of AI on the environment. We've heard concerns, and we've heard pledges, and there is a clear, active discussion there. It made me wonder that instead of having a twin transition that we were discussing in the past few years, we're now looking at what you can call an evil twins transition, where one or the other is pulling into a different direction, and we might have some conflicting interests there. I'll leave it to the audience which part of that is evil and which isn't, because that is a loaded word in the tech sector. Above all, our discussions show that these issues are complicated, they're complex, they're messy, and so the real challenge for Europe and European policymakers gathered here today and just across Brussels in the other side is whether it can solve these issues at pace and whether it can keep up with the transformation that AI is bringing to the world, to societies, to industries, to governments, at a pace where it can actually catch up with the problems. Before we break for lunch, I want to thank all of our speakers that participated this morning. I want to thank our moderators. I want to thank our crew in the back. And obviously, I want to thank our partners for making the summit possible. Our leading partners are Accenture and Amazon. Our presenting partners are Google, MasterCard, Meta, Microsoft, PPC, and Zalando. And our visibility partner is the Klingendahl Institute. We had lots of food for thought this morning, so it's time to get actual food. Outside, we have set up a networking lunch that will be there from 1:15, or a little later, to 2:35 in the main networking space just behind you. It is lovely outside, but it's also lovely inside. So you can also hang around, connect with our journalists, connect with our pro staff, and you can discover the booths and the installations that our partners have brought to this space. This afternoon, we will turn our attention to the security aspects of technology. So that's a deeply important conversation, and one that the EU has maybe too often skipped in the past. So we'll turn our attention to that. Have a wonderful, lovely lunch, and happy networking.
We are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
If we do not renew our partnerships with the rest of the world, Europe will not be relevant.
We can make it if we are together as Europeans.
And looking ahead to what is next.
Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?